Right, sorry ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your UFC news recap and reaction video. Going into our first story, it's looking like Volkanovski will be fighting Topuria, UFC 297 in January. This is by a tweet from Volk, which just suggests he's ready for January. I'll throw it up on screen, of course. Yeah, it's an interesting fight because with Topuria, he's obviously a finisher, and I think Volk will have to finish his fight, especially because I think the Islam Makhachev rematch should be UFC 300. It's a massive fight. It'd be huge on that card. It'd be really interesting to watch. Obviously, we all want a rematch, but Topuria is a finisher, and he's a dangerous finisher on the ground, on the feet. He's got power in the hands. He's got good boxing. He was like the first Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt from Georgia, so he's obviously dangerous on the ground. So I think Volk's going to need a finish, and he's going to need a dominant finish as well. He can't be a back and forth fight and then a third, fourth round finish. I think he's going to have to get him out by the third round. He's going to have to do it definitively. Knockout, maybe a submission. I doubt he'd get a submission. It's a tough fight for Volk, especially if he wants to make, like a 3-month turnaround for UFC 300. I don't think we'll be seeing him on UFC 300 unless he puts in. It would have to be the performance of his career, and he's coming off one of the best performances of his career against Yair Rodriguez, and before that, he was coming with a great performance against Islam Makhachev, even though it was a losing performance. Most people thought he won, including myself. So, and then before that, he had a dominant, very, very dominant performance against Max Holloway in their trilogy fight, which is a 50-45, definitive scorecard, and end to that trilogy, end of that debate. So it's just like, how long can he keep up this high level of just skill, well-rounded mixed martial arts? His boxing's been on point. His wrestling's looked amazing. His submission defense, even in the Brian Ortega fight, was incredible. So it really gets you thinking, how long can he keep this up? Because I'm assuming it's pretty intense training camps. His mind's going to have to be razor focused in these training camps to get these game plans right. And I believe he's just had his 4th daughter. He's had another child. So how focused can he be while after having those outside worries and stuff like that? He has a life, obviously, outside training camps. But I believe he gets the job done. But I do not believe he can make that quick turnaround. And then our next story, we've got Garry versus Vicente Luque for UFC 296 in December. I think that's a great fight. I think did they train together? I'm not sure they trained together. That's a good fight. Obviously, you got Garry, who's a young, up and coming star in the making in the welterweight division. You got Vicente Luque, who's, I guess he's a veteran, kind of. He's, he can take some damage. He can give some punishment out. He's got a good ground game. It's a tough fight for Garry because he ain't going to be able to put Garry out. He ain't going to be able to put Luque out, sorry. And Luque's got the power to put Garry out, who might just be a little bit chinny. We saw that in his fight on the John Jones card, who I can't remember who that was against. We saw that on that fight. That he can be dropped, he can be hurt, and it can possibly be over. And with someone like Vicente Luque, who's a very tough, durable guy, it's only a 3-rounder, so I'm not going to say he's going to put him into deep waters, but it could be a tricky fight. So I kind of like Vicente Luque's chances for that in December. And then the next story, we got Israel Adesanya has pled guilty for drink driving, and this was actually 3 weeks before the Strickland fight, so this was in training camp. This is probably towards the end of training camp, even though that fight was announced 4 weeks before it happened. Adesanya was in training camp since before Whitaker and Duplessis. He's probably that's probably when he started training camp. So he had maybe like a 2-month camp, something like that. I've been saying Israel Adesanya isn't a great person, and I see people like Bisping's making excuses, and they are abhorrent. He admitted to drink driving himself. He just sounds like a fucking idiot. He's like, we've all done it. No, most people aren't stupid enough to drive in a car in any level of intoxication. And here's the thing, right? The thing with this is he said he wasn't even double over, but he had to go get blood taken that takes a little bit of time. So the alcohol could be getting out of his system. He could have been way more than what he actually was. So yeah, he's pled guilty. I think he's only going to get a fine for it. He shouldn't. He should. I don't think it's any jail time. It's probably just a fine. Yeah, and then next up we had Conor McGregor meet Snoop Dogg because Snoop Dogg visited the Black Forge Inn for his show in Dublin. It's not really that interesting. I don't really care. It's just it's a bit of news, isn't it? It's a kind of dry news. It seems that Rafael Fiziev has suffered an ACL there after his fight with Mateusz Gamrot over the weekend, which is it's not been a good fit year for Fiziev. He's coming off. He was looking quite good this year. Pretty sure I picked him to beat Gaethje. He lost to Gaethje in a fight that some people thought he won. I didn't think he won. I thought Gaethje won it very clearly. And then Gamrot, he threw a kick. I believe it hit the elbow. We thought he broke his foot, but it seems he might have torn his ACL. That's a story that's just come out a couple hours ago. So that's more than like a year off. So we might not see him until early 2025. Late 2024 at the earliest. Which is unfortunate because he's a very fun fighter. And yeah, it's not been the best of years for him. In the slightest. And also another interesting story is it seems Hamzat Chimaev won't be representing Sweden UFC 294 against Paulo Costa, which is interesting because that is obviously, I believe he's lived there since he was 18. Was he like 28 now? So he's lived there a good chunk of his life. I think he's moved to Russia. Also, he's moved out and he won't be representing Sweden anymore. I don't think it's any political reason. I believe it's because he's moved. That's what I read. I only skimmed it briefly. Yeah, so it shouldn't have too much of an effect on the fight, but it's a story. It's a kind of, not a good day for news. But an actual interesting one, which I can probably get into a bit more, is Joe Rogan recently said in his podcast that if anyone can make a comeback, it'd be Conor McGregor after that horrific, that leg break he suffered against Dustin Poirier. He can't make a comeback. He can't go up and be lightweight champion, welterweight champion, fucking middleweight champion. Do you know what I mean? His time is done. And I'm one of these people who actually has hope for him against Chandler. But that hope's starting to slowly, it's starting to slowly dwindle because he's not, he doesn't even look like he's really dedicated to his training. He just looks like he's living life, which you can't fault him for. He's deserved it. He's earned it. But it'd be the type of, we could just see him go out with a whimper and he won't be on the top of the sport. It just really gets you thinking, what if he didn't take that year off to go fight Floyd Mayweather? What if he didn't, lose to Khabib, which was always probably going to happen. But it's just, even if he lost to Khabib and didn't have that year off, he probably would have won that second Dustin Poirier fight. That first round was probably his round, and he was going with a more flat-footed boxing approach as compared to his where he'd throw wild kicks and use his boxing, to finish the fight. But he got wild kicks, get you thinking. So it's still an interesting fight. We don't know when we're going to see him, considering it looks like Volk's fighting in January. So we don't know if we're going to see McGregor at all. February maybe. We're meant to see him in December, but that doesn't look to be unless they want to book him on a fight night card, which I don't see them doing. But at this point, he shouldn't even really be fighting on. He shouldn't be fighting in main events on pay-per-views. He should be the featured fight on pay-per-views. He shouldn't. You know what I mean? So it's interesting, but it's sad because he could have been so much better than he was. But there seems to be a matchup booked between Tabitha Ricci and, I'm going to butcher the name, Luque Godinez in the UFC strawweight division. Now, I don't even know if her name's Lupe. She's been quite active. It's an interesting fight. I think that's been booked for the November card. I'll give my picks when it comes down to the actual fight. Probably fight day I'll make my picks. But overall, pretty dry news. The only stories that are really interesting were Garry and Vicente Luque, Volkanovski and Ilya Topuria. But I kind of logically thought with December being booked and he not looking to be on that card because it was not going to make that championship triple header. They very rarely do that. January is probably logical, especially if they want him for UFC 300. Garry and Vicente Luque is interesting. Fiziev's ACL injury is interesting. There's not really much you can speak on that. So, overall, pretty dry news. Let's see you guys in a bit. I should be coming up with a video about Tony Ferguson either in 2 days' time or tomorrow, because I do have a video planned for the boxing news. So yeah, that's pretty much it. In a bit.